Okay, our presentation is using goal setting and feedback to increase weekly running distance. We're each going to introduce ourselves to begin. First off, my name is Amber Chi. I live in Eva Beach, Hawaii. I've been in the field for about 3 years. I currently work as a special education teacher in the Alternative Learning Center classroom.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elena Kiki. I currently live in Las Vegas, Nevada. I've been in the field for about 3 years now. I started as an RBT and now I'm a BCABA. I currently work for a private company in Las Vegas that services people with autism ages 2 to 22.
Hey, my name is Brandon Kern. I live in Sugar City, Idaho. I've been in this field for about 2 years. I currently work as a habilitative interventionalist, which is about the equivalent of an RBT.
All right, my name is Valeria Aparicio Perez. I live in San Diego, California, and I've been in the field for 2 years, currently working as a behavior therapist. So the original study that we're using is called Using Goal Setting and Feedback to Increase Weekly Running Distance. 5 women were used in the study, ages 18 to 28 years. The intervention was based on daily and weekly goal setting and feedback. They tracked running by using Manifest sport band and sensor, but we were not able to use it, so we used our own phones or pedometers. We modified our study to walking instead of running to make it simpler for everyone. So the first supporting literature is called Physical Activity Levels in Adults. Walking Sustainability and Health, funding from a study of the Walking for Health group. 19 walkers agreed to take part in face-to-face tape-recorded interviews about their walking experiences during the winter of 2014 and 2015. Health factors were individualized, with many health conditions implicated in personal decision to start walking. Motivating factors were tape, health, companionship, and exploration was one of the few motivation factors. The structure within the walking environment enabled participants to set personal goals, express their agency, make accommodations and adjustments when necessary, and also make contributions to fellow walkers. The findings from the present study confirmed the established link between group walks and their health. And the participants in the findings report the participants were creating their own personal goals and were motivated to complete them. The next supporting literature is physical activity levels in adults and older adults 3 to 4 years after pedometer-based walking interventions, long-term follow-up of participants from 2 randomized controlled trials in UK primary care. The long-term follow-up of 2 completed trials were used are pedometer and the pace up 3-arm support and pace lift 2-arm support. 681 pace up and 225 pace lift for adult participants provided accelerometry data at 3 to 4 years. Participants were instructed to wear the accelerometer on a belt over one hip for 7 consecutive days from getting up until going to bed. These findings suggest that the adult and older adult participants receiving 12-week pedometer-based walking interventions provided by hosts with nurse support are still doing more physical activity 3 to 4 years later. Both groups were able to maintain physical activity over a 3 to 4 period. This is important because even though participants were not increasing PA levels, were maintaining after 3 to 4 years from the 12-month intervention. The next supporting literature is increasing studying larger session duration goals is associated with greater future physical activity. 225 underactive adults were gathered and randomly placed in one of 2 tailored print-based physical activity interventions. A previously validated print-based program from social cognitive theory and a more enhanced intervention with tailor based on 5 additional constructs. Interviews were conducted to track participant goals. Of the 198 participants who completed physical activity assessment at 6 months, 61.6% had met their initial goal for MVPA. Results of the study indicate that those adults who set larger session durations engage in more weekly MVPA at the follow-up. This points out that goal setting is effective and helps increase PA levels. For the next supporting literature, increasing physical activity and enjoyment through goal setting at summer camp. The study took place at a university-operated day camp open to the public in a large western U.S. city. The sample consisted of 88 children, campers. The mean age of the sample was 7.8 to 1.6 years, with 46 males and 42 females. After baseline, campers set individual step count goals, which counselors recorded on their camp rosters. They also set group goals and camp-wide goals. The results of the study generally support the efficacy of goal-setting program to increase step counts and enjoyment of physical activity at a summer camp. Individual goals significantly increased step counts. The study showed that children were able to meet their step count goal individually and as a group, as well as increase their physical activity levels.
All right, now that we were all able to get a little background on our original study, as well as some supporting literature on how important it is to set goals and make sure you have a reliable partner to keep those goals, we can now see the purpose of our experiment. The purpose of our experiment is to use goal setting and feedback to increase daily as well as weekly walking distance using a pedometer to track daily steps. The pedometer can be a physical pedometer, or it can be a pedometer on a cellular device or in an app. Goal setting will happen once a week with feedback at the same time as the goal setting. Participants. There were 4 participants that participated in this experiment. 3 women named Amber, Elena, and Valeria, as well as 1 man named Brandon. The ages of the participants range from 23 to 34. 3 of the 4 participants described their day-to-day lives as sedentary. 1 of the participants described their lives as active. Each of the 4 participants also described their lifestyle as healthy, with minor illnesses occurring occasionally. The setting. The setting of the experiment is as follows for each person. Elena was in Las Vegas, Nevada. Brandon lives in Sugar City, Idaho. Amber is in Ava Beach, Hawaii. And Valeria lives in San Diego, California. Steps were cumulative for the day and could occur inside or outside at any of the previous geographical locations. Steps included on the treadmill, to and from locations, as well as any steps taken in an immobile position. Therefore, just standing up and stepping up and down, those also counted towards the goal. Materials. The materials needed for the experiment were a pedometer or pedometer app, as well as a device with either Google Hangouts, Google Meet, or both downloaded onto it. Google Hangout and or Meet were required for a weekly check-in with the participants observed. During this weekly check-in was when they went over either baseline or previous criterion results and determined the next criterion for the experiment. The measurement and design. Our study was conducted as a change in criterion design when the intervention was in place. Data was taken using a pedometer or a pedometer app and documented using the following data collection chart. The data collection chart, as you can see below, has the session date, which would give you month, day, and year, the observer, as well as the participant. Each of the 4 of us were acting as an observer and a participant. We were paired so that Amber was Elena's observer, as well as Elena was Amber's observer, and Brandon was Valeria's observer, as well as Valeria was Brandon's observer. The goal steps were also recorded in this chart, the actual steps and whether or not the goal was met or not. Steps were to start at 0 each day and collected until the participant went to sleep each night. Alrighty, moving on to the behavioral definition. Our study is a little bit different than the original study because in the original study they used running. We switched it to walking because of health concerns and physical ability. We decided that walking would be more of a proper measurement to go about for our experiment. We defined walking as any occurrence wherein participant is standing up and moves one leg forward, while leg 2 is in a stationary position and is followed by leg 2 moving forward while leg 1 is in a stationary position. Examples of walking are strolling, brisk walking, and regular pace walking. Non-examples of walking include running, jumping, and skipping. Alrighty, for baseline. This experiment, just like any other experiment, started in a baseline condition for 2 weeks. The original study did a baseline of about 2 to 4 weeks, so we were on the shorter end of this. During this time, participants were tracking their everyday step value from start to finish, starting at 0. They weren't to change anything from a normal routine. This was supposed to be a very true, realistic picture of where the participants were at the current time. Participants took data for 2 weeks in hopes of stabilizing data for baseline the best possible. Steps were counted by a pedometer or pedometer app on a cellular device. No goals were set for the duration of baseline. Each person was both an interventionist and participant for the baseline, as mentioned earlier. Each partner received the data from their paired participants, and the participants were as followed again: Brandon and Valeria, Amber and Elena. The check-in occurred at the end of the baseline condition, as well as another time during the experiment condition. Alrighty. For intervention, we began with a meeting. This occurred either over Google Meets or Google Hangouts, depending on what was most convenient for the paired partners. During this time, the partner and the participant went over the baseline data. They went over averages, ranges, as well as kind of a goal of where the participant wanted to be with their activity level. At this point, each participant also set a long-term distance goal for day-to-day activity. This ranged anywhere from 2 to 3 miles, I believe. Each day, participants were to record the distance that they went for the day in steps total. After the first week, the participant would meet again with their paired partner to go over results. If the goal was not met for the first week, participants were allowed to keep the goal the same or slightly lower the goal for a more attainable goal. If the goal was met, there should have been an increase in the goal steps per day for the following week. Let's say a person hit the goal for the majority of the previous week at 2.5 miles. Their next goal should be anywhere from 2.6 to 3 miles, essentially. Data was then taken for a second week to reach the new criterion or to continue with the same criterion. Alrighty, inter-observer agreement. Our inter-observer agreement calculation equation that we used was number of intervals agreed upon over total intervals times 100, which would give us the IOA percentage. Ours was a 14-day agreement over 14 days total, which was our interval, times by 100 equals 100% IOA. We would like to talk about this in our limitations, however. For treatment integrity, we were able to measure and to keep treatment integrity by a yes or no checklist throughout the experiment to ensure that treatment integrity was maintained. We were also able to maintain treatment integrity by our weekly check-ins. This kind of kept everyone on track and kind of narrowed down the scope of our presenting to our paired partner. The questionnaire that we were using to ensure treatment integrity was kept is as followed. And it was answered in a yes or no fashion. So step 1 was that we tracked baseline when no intervention was being placed. That was a yes, we did do that. Step 2 was that a goal was set for the participant for the week. Yes, we also did that. We set a goal for the first week and we changed the criterion for all participants, either a little bit above or a little bit below for the second week. For step 3, we tracked the number of steps for the participant for each day. That was a yes as well. For step 4, we were to record the data in data collection sheet that was previously seen in a slide 3 slides prior, and when the session was over. And in our case, that'd be when the day was over. That's a yes. We were able to attain that. And step 5 was to record whether the participant met the goal, which we also were able to attain. Treatment integrity was kept for the entirety of our experiment.
All right, now we're going to move on to results. So we're going to talk about baseline results for each participant, as well as the criterion 1, criterion 2, and each of the participants' graphs. So first we're going to start with Elena's results for baseline. Her baseline was taken over 14 days from February 11th to February 24th. Her lowest step day during that 14 days was on February 17th with 1,170 steps. Her highest step day occurred on in February 24th with 7,554 steps. Her average for the 14 days was 3,571 steps. And next, we have Brandon's results for the baseline. His baseline was also taken over 14 days from February 11th to February 24th. During those 14 days, his lowest step day was on February 17th with 996 steps. His highest step day occurred on February 21st with 4,582 steps. His average over the 14 days was 2,860 steps. Next, we have Amber's baseline results. She also took baseline data for 14 days occurring from February 11th to February 24th. Her lowest step day during those 14 days was on February 11th with 2,830 steps. Her highest step day was on February 16th with 9,889 steps. Over the average of 14 days was 6,071 steps. Then next, we have Valeria. She took baseline data over the course of 10 days, which occurred from February 11th to February 15th, and then took a little break and started again on February 18th to February 22nd. Her lowest step day occurred on February 12th with 2,748 steps. Her highest step day occurred on February 15th with 5,327 steps, and her average over the 10 days was 4,091 steps. Next, we're going to continue with the criterion results. We're going to start with Elena. So after her baseline, it was decided that her criterion would be of 5,500 steps for the 7 days. She successfully reached her goal for 2 out of the 7 days. Her lowest step day occurred on March 1st with 331 steps. Her highest step day occurred on February 25th with 7,239 steps, which made an average for 3,374 steps. For criterion 2, since she only made the goal for 2 out of the 7 days, it was decided to lower her criterion down to 5,000 steps. So out of the 7 days, she was successful 3 out of the 7 days. Her lowest step day was on March 10th with 876 steps. Her highest step day was on March 9th with 8,601 steps. And then the average over the 7 days was 4,275 steps. Next, you can see her graph. First, you have the baseline with the arrow pointing to her lowest step day of 1,170 steps. Next, you see the criterion. The criterion line is at 5,500 steps, with 2 of the data points above the criterion line showing that she met the goal for 2 days. For criterion 2, the criterion line is set at 5,000 with 3 data points above the criterion line showing that she made her goal for 3 of the 7 days for her goal. So next we have Brandon. For his criterion 1, he had a goal set for 4,980 steps. His lowest step day was on March 3rd with 4,183 steps. His highest step day occurred on February 27th with 5,777 steps. He averaged 4,980 steps and successfully made the goal of 4 out of the 7 days. So next we have his criterion 2. Since he made the goal 4 out of the 7 days, he increased his criterion to 5,577 steps. His lowest step day occurred on March 10th with 4,980 steps. His highest step day occurred on March 8th with 7,171 steps. He averaged 5,919 steps over the 7 days. He met his goal 5 out of the 7 days. So next, you can see his graph. The graph shows that the arrow is pointing to his lowest step day. And then at criterion 1, you can see the criterion line is set at 4,980. And 4 of the data points are above the criterion line. He made his goal 4 out of the 7 days. And criterion line 2 is set at 5,577 steps, and 5 data points are above the criterion line, showing that he met his goal 5 out of the 7 days. Next, we have Amber's criterion results. Her goal was set at 5,500 for the week. Her lowest step day was on February 25th with 6,383 steps. Her highest day was on March 3rd with 9,884 steps. Her average over the 7 days was 6,071 steps. She made her goal for all 7 days. So moving on to criterion 2, since she made her goal for all 7 days, the criterion was increased to 6,800 steps. Her lowest step day was on March 8th with 6,733 steps. Her highest step day was on March 10th with 9,664 steps. For the 7-day average, she averaged 7,299 steps. She made her goal 6 out of the 7 days for that week. Now, looking at her graph, you can see that the arrow is pointing to the lowest step made during baseline. Then the criterion for 1 is set at 5,500 steps, and since she made that goal all 7 days, all 7 data points are above that line. For criterion 2, the criterion line is set at 6,800 steps, where 6 out of the 7 data points are above the line, showing that she met the goal for 6 out of the 7 days. Next, we have Valeria. So for her criterion, it was set for 5,000 steps per day. She took data out of 5 days. Her lowest step day was on February 25th with 4,003 steps. Her highest step day was on February 28th with 7,133 steps. Her average out of the 5 days was 5,331 steps, and she successfully completed her goal 3 out of the 5 days. The next, her criterion 2, since she made the goal 3 out of the 5 days, it was increased to 6,000 steps. Her lowest step day occurred on March 6th with 6,987 steps. Her highest step day was on March 5th with 7,864 steps. Her average out of the 3 days was 7,335 steps, and she successfully made 3 out of the 3 days. She met her goal on all 3 days. Then looking at her graph, it shows in baseline, the arrows pointing to her lowest step day during baseline. For criterion 1, the line is set at 5,000 steps. She has 3 data points above the line showing that she successfully met her goal on 3 out of those 5 days. On criterion 2, the criterion line was moved to 6,000, And all 3 data points are above the criterion line to show that she met her goal on all 3 days.
So in conclusion, we found that with the many limitations that we had, they might have affected the outcome of our replication, though despite that, 3 out of 4 did meet their goals on both criterions. 1 out of 3 that met their goal was not able to walk the same amount of days for each criterion as the other participants. This could have affected the outcome of that person's data if they had walked the rest of those. For example, in their criterion 2, they only had 3 days. If they had walked the rest of that for the full 7 days, that maybe could have affected the outcome if they had not met that goal the rest of those days. In the data, each participant met their goal, did show an increase in the amount of activity during the weekends. 1 participant that did not meet their goal mostly showed a decrease during the weekend. This was in part due to sickness. Sickness affected each of the participants, and we do see that within the data. There are several data points that did drop fairly low or fairly sudden. Even with the many limitations of this replication, we did produce similar results as the original study. Amongst all the participants as a whole, in baseline, the average was 4,152 steps were taken. In the first criterion, the average for all the participants was 5,175. In the second criterion, the average was 6,070 steps. As you can see, in each phase, there was an increase even with the average. So despite all the limitations of this replication, we have shown that similar results to the actual original study. As I said before, with the limitations, there were quite a few. The first one I'd like to talk about, each person had to be a participant and a researcher. Each of us took data and was a participant. This could have affected each of our data based on how we took it and how we gave it. In the beginning, the data could also be influenced just by us being the ones that took the actual data itself. Another difference that we had is in the original study, they used Nike equipment to measure and record the data. We did not have access to this equipment, so each of us either used a pedometer or an iPhone. Each of our devices were not tested for accuracy. In the original study, each device was tested to see how close each step was and if it was accurately estimating how many miles they were running in. Because of these different styles of equipment that we're using, it could possibly have been less accurate since all of them were not necessarily specifically tested for accuracy. Another limitation was that each of us were in a different state and time zone. This made it more difficult to contact each other and to give that data back and forth. This also wound up affecting our IOA since we were not able to be in person for each recording of the IOA. Instead, each participant each day had to send their data to the observer who then recorded it. This is why we had 100% observation. This might have changed if we were able to be in person. For this replication, there was also no screening done with each participant, since we were both the researcher and the participant. Because of this, that means the outcome of the replication had a little external validity. We were not able to get a randomization on our participants since each of us had to be a participant and a researcher. This also is shown in our participants being in that we had 3 females and only 1 male. And so we were not able to get a decent average to be able to show for any specific population. And also in the baseline, there were only 2 that were able to reach a very stable baseline. The other 2 reached their baseline was close to stable, but wasn't quite. Also, the study that we were replicating did not include all the information that we needed for an exact replication. For example, in the baseline procedure, it only said that data was taken for 2 to 4 weeks, but no explanation was given for the duration of the baseline, whether or not that was based on if they hit a stable baseline or not. So because of this, we only did for the 2 weeks. Another limitation was that one of our participants were not able to meet the same number of days for each criterion as the other participants. The data for this person could have been much different if the days were taken, data was taken on all the days that everyone else did. One big limitation was that many of our participants were sick during different stages of the replication. This affected especially one of our participants who was not able to meet their goals, most likely because of this. In our replication, we also selected walking rather than running as the original study. So this means that that could have affected our data as well. Another thing in the original study, each participant was selected was made sure that they were active with each of us, since we were not able to specifically randomize or choose our participants, that this was not taken into consideration. And that is our presentation. We'd like to thank you all for watching. These are our references. And again, thank you for watching.